Peter, James, and John went up with Jesus to Mount Tabor, and they saw Jesus transfigured before them. The man they had come to know was probably a great prophet, very charismatic man who they followed down below the mountain. Now they went up the mountain, and they found out that through the transfiguration that there was a lot more to Jesus than met the eye. Because as we heard, his face shone like the sun, and his clothes were as white as light. Picture that. And there's no real indication that the light's coming from above or the light's coming from behind, but rather that it's coming from inside him. The glory of God is shining from inside him out. Perhaps we can just get a little bit of glimpse of that. If we've ever seen somebody who for some reason is just really joyful about something great has happened in their life. Maybe they've fallen in love. Maybe something else has happened. But you can just tell when you're with them that they just kind of beam. Okay? That's a little bit of what it might have been like with Jesus. It just shone forth in front of him, in front of the apostles. And Peter says, Lord, it's good for us to be here. It's good for us to be here to see who you are, the Son of God, the mighty one, the one who was filled with God's presence, and it's just shining forth. It's good for us to be here for that reason. And it's also good for us to be here because seeing you knows what we are called to be. Because if they're following Jesus, and this is what Jesus looks like, this is the model and example for them of who they are to be. It's important for us to have a model, a vision of who we are, but more importantly, who we are becoming, who we will be. But really, that's nothing new. We've been doing that since we were children. We've been doing that when we find out with our men or women, how it is, what's it like to be a man? What's it like to be a woman? And we pick that up from people around us. If you're a guy, it'll be, who did your dad say? Or your uncle, or your neighbor, or your grandpa, or a coach, or a teacher. Or a woman, the same thing. Your mom, your grandma, a next door neighbor, a teacher, a coach. How did they kind of model what it meant to be a man or a woman? And just kind of reflect on that, will you? Who taught you to do that? I got a list of people who taught me how to be a man, and I'll just choose my dad, could be others. But one thing he taught me, it's a little silly kind of a thing, but I remember it. We were having a picnic out on the picnic table during the summer, and I had a glass of tea there, and I said, please pass the sugar. And my dad says, what are you going to do with that? You're not going to put that in your tea, are you? I said, yeah, I like it. My dad says, real men don't put sugar in their tea. That was it. No sugar in my tea ever again. I still cannot stand sweet tea. But as that goes, sometimes things we learn, we need to unlearn. Because I found out that putting sugar in your tea doesn't make you a man or not. I know a lot of good men, real men, who still put sugar in their tea. That's just fine. But something I did learn that's still with me is something about my dad. It taught me to be a responsible man who works hard. My dad was a baker, and he and my mom ran their own bakery, and he was the only baker there. So in order for us to get any money to put food on our table, he had to show up. And he had a bad back from the war, a worse back than I have. And there's some days that I know that they could just see it in his eyes, how much the pain was there. But he would get some pain pills and would go to work. My responsibility to take care of this family. He got up and he did it. He was responsible. And every one of us kids are hardworking, responsible people because of his example. Who are examples for you to be a man or to be a woman? What did you have to unlearn? What did you learn that you still carry with you? It's just as important, if not more important, when it comes to what it's like to be a Catholic Christian. What does it look like to be a person of faith, a man or a woman of faith? I have a long list of people here who have shown me in their own bodies, in their own flesh, what it's like to live out faith. I'll again just stick with my folks. There were 10 of us in the family, and so sometimes we went to the church in shifts. Sometimes you go with my dad, sometimes with my mom, whatever, But if you went with my dad, we sat right over there, and he got us here 15 minutes early. And I'm a kid, and I'm thinking, what am I doing here? But if you went with him, you were there 15 minutes early. So after probably too long of a time, I figured, well, I guess I could pray. Fancy that. So he taught me, you go to church, and you can get there early and prepare your heart for the Mass. It's an important thing to learn. My mom, I could say a lot of things about her. I know her to be a very prayerful woman and a woman of deep faith. But I'll tell you this other part. We'd come to church, we sit over there, we get up and we go home. We get in the car, and there were days when we started bugging each other. The kids started bugging each other right away. You're sitting on my part of the seat. There's a line right here. You can't stay on your own side. And we'd get into it. My mom would turn around and say, for goodness sake, you just went to church. Can't you behave any longer than that? And I'm thinking, what's that got to do with it? Except, you learn that what goes on in here needs to affect my life out there. So those are good things to learn. Who taught you how to be a good Catholic Christian? What did they teach you? In the Transfiguration, Peter, James, and John got a glimpse of the goodness of God and in real experience of the presence of God. They experienced God through Jesus, saw what he was like. We too have those experiences of God, glimpses of God's presence in lots of ways. I'll mention a few. When we know that we are loved and that we love. God is love. When we experience that love, especially over a period of time, we know a little bit about what it's like to be in God's presence. Or we know that when we're in terrible need of help and someplace out of nowhere, the help comes to us. I got a list of those things, some more important than others, but it happens. You could call it coincidence if you want. I call it a God incident. Or somehow people end up there and are able to help when I need it most. Or it could be that some things in the past that I haven't understood, I finally gained some kind of perspective on it, some understanding about what happened before, and I can move on. Or it might be through someone forgiving me, or me having the grace to forgive someone else that I didn't think I'd be able to do. Somehow, God's grace moved me to say, okay, I forgive and let's move on. Or it might be in some experience of nature, the beauty or the power of nature. Just have a sense of the presence of God. It's important for us to recognize those things because it changes us. It transformed the disciples so that they might be able to walk with Jesus once they came down the mountain, and even though they ran away and one of them denied him at the passion and the death of Christ, there was enough in them of that experience of Christ for them to stay together until the resurrection and Jesus appeared again. It's important for us to know those things so that we too might be changed. And in the gospel it says, so when the disciples looked up, they saw nothing else, no one else except Jesus alone. There it is. To be able to see and to experience Jesus Christ in our lives. To know his word, how it applies to us. And that is what transforms us, changes us, so that the God inside might shine through. And also, so that we might live out what we heard in the beginning of the second reading, where it said, bear your hardship for the gospel with the strength that comes from God.